Welcome to part 2 of your billion-year family tree, a slideshow about evolution. I'm Allison, and today we're going to meet one of our ancient ancestors, LUCA. LUCA is shorthand for Last Universal Common Ancestor. LUCA was a microscopic, single-celled creature that lived around 3.8 billion years ago. So how old is that? 1 billion years equals 1,000 million years. So 3.8 billion years ago, that's a number that has 12 zeros in it. So LUCA is really ancient. Let's learn more about LUCA's name. In this context, the word last means first. When you're traveling back in time, LUCA's the last ancestor, the last one on the timeline. One way of imagining LUCA is that LUCA is like the acorn that starts the tree. No matter how big a tree may grow, it started from a single sprout. LUCA is our universal ancestor. The entire universe of life on Earth stems from LUCA. And what do scientists mean when they say common ancestor? It means LUCA's a shared ancestor, an ancestor we all have in common. Here's another example of a common ancestor. The wolf is the common ancestor of all domestic dog breeds. All of the dogs are descended from the wolf. In the same way that all dogs are descended from wolves, all living creatures are descended from LUCA. Let's go back to the family tree for a moment. Here is the dog's line of descent, and just like humans and snails, it goes all the way back to LUCA. How do we know that dogs are descended from wolves? We know from DNA testing. There are a bunch of different tests on the market right now that can give you information about your own DNA and about your pet's DNA. One of the other ways that most of us learn about DNA is through crime stories and the use of DNA in evidence. One of the amazing things about LUCA is that LUCA had DNA. Hidden inside LUCA's body was a strand of genetic material. DNA is the link that connects you to LUCA. DNA is a molecule. DNA is really small, so small that it can fit inside a tiny cell. DNA is shaped like a double helix. All DNA, whether it's from a dog or a human or a single-celled bacteria, has this distinctive shape. The shape of DNA is often compared to a spiral staircase. This is one of my favorite images of the DNA molecule. In it, you're looking straight down the middle. It's like looking down into a spiral staircase. The spiral staircase and the DNA molecule are both built in the shape of a helix. The helix is a specific type of spiral that has very organized loops. Another example of a helix is the Slinky toy. The metal loops form a single helix. So the Slinky is a single helix and the DNA is a double helix. It's kind of like two Slinkies linked together. Like a Slinky, the DNA can bend and stretch. If you took one strand of DNA and stretched it out, it would be about 5 feet long, which is even longer than a stretched out Slinky. Even if the molecule were stretched out, you still wouldn't be able to see it because it would be so microscopically thin. It's only very recently that we've learned how to read DNA. It's often called decoding. For example, you might have heard the phrase decoding the genome. It was front page news when about 20 years ago, scientists announced that they had successfully decoded the entire human genome. In order to understand the science of the family tree, we need to know a little bit more about genetics in the genome. We'll start by looking at the relationship between DNA and the genome. Don't worry, I'm not going to get too technical. The genome, or genetic code, is the information that's written inside the DNA molecule. Why is this code so important? Because it contains instructions for how to grow a living body. What do we mean when we say decoding the genome? It means that scientists are now able to read the information that's written in the DNA. Before, it was like we had the book of DNA, but we didn't know how to read the words. Reading and decoding are related concepts. When you read a book, you are decoding the sentences. Another example of a code is digital computer code. This is a code that's written in ones and zeros. Computer software translates the digital code of ones and zeros into stuff that humans can understand. How can there be writing or code inside a molecule? Guess what? It's very complicated. I'm just going to give a very brief overview. First off, the DNA doesn't use letters or alphabet or words or anything that resembles human language. The code inside the DNA is written with chemical ingredients. In order to decipher the genetic code, scientists have to translate the chemical language used by the DNA into something more familiar. You'll notice that all of these diagrams contain the code TCGA. These actual letters are not found inside DNA. Instead, the TCGA letters are part of the system that scientists use to translate the code. I'm not expecting you to remember any of these details. The main point is that DNA contains information, and scientists are learning how to decipher the code. Like a book, the DNA molecule is a real physical object. So the molecule is called the DNA, and the code that's written inside the molecule is called the genome, or the genetic code. A book is a physical object that contains a story. In a similar way, the DNA molecule contains the genetic code. Evolution is the story of how you are genetically related to all of the other creatures living on Earth.